There's a generation everybody has an opinion about. They've been called entitled, fragile, lazy, addicted to their phones. They've been blamed for killing everything from starter homes to paper napkins to the handshake. If you've read a headline in the last 15 years, you already know the caricature: the grown adult who won't grow up, eating avocado toast while complaining that the world is unfair. Almost nobody, though, talks about what actually happened to them. And what happened to them is one of the most dramatic bait and switches any generation has ever lived through. Because these are the people who did everything they were told to do, followed every instruction, checked every box, and then watched the rules change on them halfway through the game. To understand why millennials are the way they are, you have to understand the exact whiplash they grew up inside. Let's set the stage. Gen Y, the millennials, were born roughly between 1981 and 1996, the kids who came of age right around the turn of the century. And they hold a strange, one-of-a-kind position in history. They're the last generation to have a truly analog childhood, and the first to build their entire adult lives online. They remember dial-up screeching, landline phones, getting lost with an actual paper map folded wrong in the glove box. And then, in their 20s, they handed their whole social lives over to Facebook and Instagram. One foot in a world that no longer exists, one foot in a world that never stops moving. That straddle is the key to almost everything about them. So picture a kid in the 1990s. This kid is being raised on a very specific message, delivered constantly by parents and teachers riding a brand new wave of self-esteem parenting. You are special. You can be anything you want. Follow your passion, and the rest will work itself out. There were participation trophies. There was believe in yourself. And there was one promise repeated above all the others. Go to college. Get the degree, and the good life is basically guaranteed. You'll do even better than your parents did. And honestly, at the time, it was a genuinely optimistic moment to be a kid. The economy was booming. The Cold War had just ended. The future looked like it was running smoothly on rails. So this kid grows up believing, all the way down in their bones, in a simple deal. Work hard, get the diploma, and you'll be fine. They believed it completely. They took on the debt. They earned the degree. They showed up ready. And then they walked out of that college door and straight into 2008, the financial crisis. The Great Recession landed right as the oldest millennials were stepping into the workforce. And the promised payoff simply wasn't there. Entry-level jobs vanished. Wages flattened, while the price of everything that actually mattered, housing, healthcare, education, just kept climbing. The deal they had been sold their entire lives quietly collapsed, and nobody ever apologized for it. The psychologist Jeffrey Arnett had to invent a whole new life stage. He called it emerging adulthood, just to describe what was happening. An entire cohort stuck in a long, uncertain limbo between being a teenager and being a fully fledged adult. They hit the traditional milestones, the house, the marriage, the stability, years later than any generation before them. Not because they were lazy, because the ladder had lost most of its rungs. And that does something specific to a person's psychology. First, there's the burnout, and not the casual kind you shake off with a weekend. In 2019, the writer Anne Helen Peterson finally named it millennial burnout. A bone-deep exhaustion that comes from being told your entire worth is your productivity and then running on a treadmill that never quite pays out. Then there's the comparison. Millennials were the first generation to come of age under the constant glow of social media. Leon Festinger's old idea that human beings can't help measuring themselves against everyone around them suddenly got cranked up to a global 24-hour highlight reel scale. Everybody else's life looked like it was working out. They practically invented a word for the feeling: FOMO. And underneath all of it sat a quiet kind of grief, the gnawing sense that they'd done everything right and still ended up behind, carrying adult-sized burdens with far fewer of the adult rewards their parents had taken for granted. But here's the part the fragile, entitled millennial headlines always leave out. This is not a broken generation. Look at what they actually did with all that disappointment. They're the ones who dragged mental health out of the shadows, who made going to therapy normal, who turned boundaries and self-care from taboo into everyday language. They looked at the old bargain: grind yourself into dust for a company that would lay you off without blinking, and they stopped pretending it was worth it. They started asking for meaning, for flexibility, for an actual life. What reads as entitlement from the outside is very often just a generation refusing to lie about a deal that stopped being fair. And that nostalgia they get mocked for, the 90s obsession, the throwback everything, that isn't immaturity either. It's a whole generation quietly reaching back toward the last time the future ever felt safe. So if you're a millennial, and any of this is landing a little too hard, hear this clearly. You are not behind because you failed. You are behind because you were handed a map to a world that got demolished while you were still learning to read it. That exhaustion is real, and it was never proof that you weren't trying hard enough. And if you love a millennial, the one buried under browser tabs and side hustles and a burnout they rarely mention, understand that beneath the irony and the memes is a person who was promised something, believed it with their whole heart, and has been grieving the gap ever since, while still, somehow, showing up every single day. This generation was never fragile. They're the ones who kept building after the ground shifted underneath them. And that's not weakness. That might just be the most resilient thing there is. If this one hit home, do me a favor and subscribe. This whole channel is about the quiet patterns most of us never get the words for. And millennials, I want to hear it. Drop a comment and tell me the one thing you were promised that never showed up. I'll see you in the next one.